Irina Safonova was a 28-year-old woman living in a rented two-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a large residential building at 1 Demikova Street in the Akademgorodok district of Novosibirsk. The apartment was home to Irina, her 10-year-old son Andrei, and her brother Ilya, who often helped care for his nephew while Irina worked. To those around her, Irina appeared to be building a stable life despite the challenges she had faced over the past few years. Her personal life, however, was considerably more complicated. Irina was still legally married to her husband Vladimir Safonov. The couple had met while they were still teenagers and married after Irina became pregnant with their son. Years later, Vladimir accepted a job opportunity in Moscow, while Irina chose to remain in Novosibirsk, close to her parents and the community she had always known. Over time, the marriage effectively came to an end. While living in Moscow, Vladimir entered into a relationship and even had a child with another woman. Yet, despite living separate lives, neither him or Irina filed for a divorce. They continued co-parenting their son, occasionally vacationing together as a family, and remained on friendly terms. Friends later said that Vladimir was willing to divorce if Irina decided to move on, but the legal process had simply never begun. Around this time, Irina had also become involved with a photographer named Alexander Skorikin. According to friends, Alexander had admired her since the school days and genuinely believed their relationship was heading towards marriage. Yet, Irina's actions sometimes suggested she hadn't completely closed the chapter on her marriage. She occasionally shared photographs of herself with Vladimir and their son, leading friends to wonder whether she had still hoped for a reconciliation or simply wanted to preserve a sense of family for her child. Those closest to her would later say she seemed optimistic about life. Tuesday, September 8, 2009, began like any other workday. After finishing her shift as a child psychologist, Irina returned home to get ready for an evening out with Alexander. They had planned to see Quentin Tarantino's newly released film *Inglourious Bastards* at the historic Pobeda cinema in the center of Novosibirsk. The theater was nearly 25 kilometers from Irina's apartment, so Alexander picked her up in his Honda Odyssey, and together they drove into the city for a late-night screening. The movie began at approximately 8:50 p.m. and ended around 11:30 p.m. At approximately 8:55 p.m., Alexander pulled up outside Irina's apartment building. According to his account, the two spent a few minutes talking in the car before Irina reached into her handbag and took out her apartment keys. She stepped out of the vehicle, said goodbye, and walked towards the entrance. Alexander later said he watched her walk through the entrance doors, something he claimed he routinely did before driving away. If his account is accurate, it was the last confirmed sighting of Irina Safonova. The following morning, Alexander tried calling Irina. Her mobile phone was either switched off or unreachable. Concerned, he called her apartment instead. Her young son answered the phone and told him that his mother had never come home. This was the moment everyone realized something was terribly wrong. Police were contacted almost immediately. Unlike many missing person cases, officers began working on the case right away. Detectives quickly began interviewing family friends and retracing Irina's last known movements. Then, another piece of information emerged. At around 1:30 a.m. that same night, a woman returning home from her shift at a nearby medical facility had entered the building and called the elevator. When the doors opened, she noticed something unusual on the floor of the elevator cabin. Lying near the entrance were a set of apartment keys. Partially covering them was a clean advertising newspaper that appeared to have come from the building's communal mailboxes. Assuming a neighbor had accidentally dropped them, she thought little of it. The following morning, she posted a handwritten notice inside the entrance informing residents that someone's keys had been found. It was Irina's brother who recognized them. The keys belonged to Irina. If the keys had fallen naturally, it suggested that Irina had at least entered the elevator after coming home. But if someone had deliberately placed them there, the entire scene might have been staged. To this day, investigators have never publicly explained how the keys and the newspaper came to be positioned together on the elevator floor. There was no evidence that Irina had ever left the apartment building, yet she had never reached her apartment. Somehow, she had vanished within the short distance between the entrance and her own front door. Another detail would later deepen the mystery. Alexander told investigators that shortly after dropping Irina off, he had sent 2 text messages asking whether she had made it safely upstairs. For years, many believed that those messages were delivered without receiving a reply. Later reporting, however, cited a source familiar with the investigation who claimed phone records showed Irina's phone had already been switched off by approximately 12:17 am, meaning those messages were never delivered at all. Whether the battery had died, Irina switched it off herself, or someone else did, has never been determined. Investigators thoroughly searched every accessible part of the apartment building. They examined the basement, attic, elevator shaft, stairwells, utility rooms, and common hallways. Residents were interviewed one by one, and detectives searched for any indication that violence had occurred. Yet nothing was found. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, no damaged property, and no witnesses who reported hearing screams or suspicious noises. The apartment keys remain the only physical evidence connected to Irina's disappearance. Investigators also brought in search dogs. According to the later accounts, the dogs failed to establish a scent trail leading beyond the first floor of the building. Some observers interpreted this as evidence that Irina never reached the upper floors. Others pointed out that scent evidence is notoriously unreliable in apartment buildings where numerous people constantly move through common areas. Investigators themselves never treated the result as conclusive. Forensic specialists also examined the keys and the newspaper found inside the elevator. Later reporting indicated that no usable biological traces linking Irina to either of the items were recovered. Detectives likewise found no conclusive forensic evidence elsewhere in the entrance or near her apartment. If Irina had been attacked inside the building, someone had managed to leave behind virtually nothing. When investigators questioned Irina's son, he reported an unusual thing. He told investigators before leaving home, Irina did something her son would remember for the rest of his life. She had asked him a simple question: "Can I go to the movies?" It was unusual because she had never asked for his permission before. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Looking back at her disappearance, many wondered whether she had been feeling unusually anxious, guilty about leaving him for the evening, or simply wanted reassurance. It's impossible to know, but the question has remained one of the case's most haunting details. News of Irina's disappearance spread rapidly throughout Novosibirsk. Volunteers joined police officers in an extensive search effort, distributing missing person posters across the city and searching parks, abandoned buildings, forests, and nearby neighborhoods. Military cadets assisted authorities in organized ground searches, while hospitals, shelters, and morgues were contacted in the hope that someone matching Irina's description had been admitted. Days turned into weeks. Despite the massive effort, there were no confirmed sightings of Irina. Her phone showed no activity, her bank accounts remained untouched, and no credible evidence suggested that she had willingly disappeared. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. As with almost every disappearance, investigators first focused on the last person who had seen Irina alive, Alexander Skorikin. He cooperated with the police and underwent extensive questioning that lasted several hours. Investigators searched his silver Honda Odyssey, examined it for biological evidence, and later searched his home and other properties connected to him. None of these searches produced evidence that linked him to Irina's disappearance. Police also analyzed his recent communications with Irina. Phone records showed that the two had exchanged calls and text messages during the days leading up to her disappearance. But investigators reportedly concluded there was nothing unusual about the pattern of communication. The records did not suggest obsessive messaging, repeated unanswered calls, or behavior commonly associated with stalking. The investigation also confirmed that Alexander and Irina had attended the movie together that evening. Detectives reportedly reconstructed the drive from Pobeda Cinema back to Akademgorodok and concluded that Alexander's timeline was physically possible within the reported time frame. Irina's relatives publicly supported Alexander, stating that they did not believe that he was responsible for her disappearance. Officially, investigators have never identified enough evidence to accuse him of any wrongdoing. The second major suspect was Irina's husband, Vladimir Safonov. However, investigators quickly established that he had a solid alibi. At the time Irina disappeared, Vladimir was in Moscow. Only later did he travel to Novosibirsk to help search for her. Because investigators had so little evidence to work with, numerous alternative explanations were considered. One possibility was that Irina encountered an unknown attacker near the entrance of her building. Another suggested that someone inside the apartment complex intercepted her before she reached her apartment. Others theorized that she may have been forced into a waiting vehicle outside the building before anyone noticed. Some residents later did claim that they had seen suspicious vehicles in the neighborhood that night, while others remembered unusual activities near the apartment complex. Unfortunately, none of these reports could be independently verified, and none produced evidence strong enough to solve the case. Irina's son grew up without ever learning what happened to his mother. Family members continued living with uncertainty, never receiving the closure. For years, little progress was publicly reported, and the investigation eventually became inactive. Then, in 2024, Russian authorities announced that the case would be reopened as a part of a renewed homicide investigation. Officials stated that investigators would once again examine available evidence using modern investigative techniques and review previously collected information in the hope that advances in forensic science or perhaps new witnesses might finally provide answers. Whether these renewed efforts will solve the case remains unknown. As of today, Irina Safonova has never been found. Darya Bulba was born on September 25, 1995 in Odessa, Ukraine. She grew up attending the Odessa College of Hotel Management, where she majored in law. Even as a student, Darya pursued the arts. She took courses in modeling, vocals, and guitar, and dreamed of a career on the runway. After completing a local modeling school, Odessa's Art Podium, in 2013, she began working professionally as a model, shooting for catalogs, magazines, music videos, and commercials. She was described by her family as bright and hardworking. Even as a teenager, Darya traveled extensively for modeling. Between 2013 and 2015, she undertook contracts in Europe and Asia, multiple stints in Milan, and worked in Greece, Turkey, Taiwan, and Russia. In late 2015, Darya graduated from college, specializing in law, and was determined to pursue modeling full-time. She remained closely connected with her family in Odessa via social media, updating them on assignments abroad. By spring 2016, Darya had built a modest portfolio as a fashion and commercial model. In early April 2016, she signed a one-year contract with BYS Model Agency in Shanghai. On April 7, 2016, she boarded a flight to China, excited about working in one of the largest cities. Her family noted that Darya liked Shanghai and was enthusiastic about the opportunity. For the next few months, she was based in a shared apartment in Shanghai's Hongkou district. By all accounts, she was content in her new job. She was in touch with her family and would talk to them every day. Colleagues and friends described her as kind and friendly, though somewhat reserved. In June 2016, Darya continued attending fashion castings and shoots arranged by her agency. She shared photos on social media of herself posing in Shanghai city streets and reported to family that life there was normal. One friend, a Russian journalist living in Shanghai, later confirmed that Darya had no known romantic partners and was planning to focus on her career. Her roommate, Alexandra Morozova, also a model, got along with Darya and interacted with her daily. Throughout July, Darya remained largely out of public spotlight, working and socializing locally. On the morning of August 5, 2016, Darya spoke to her mother by phone. Learning of a distant typhoon and earthquake affecting China, her mother expressed concern. Darya assured her that it was far away and Shanghai was fine. Later that day, Darya told her family that she was traveling for a casting out of town and would be out of contact for a couple of days. Believing it was due to a different mobile plan, her relatives were not alarmed until August 7th, when Darya had still not called back. When Darya failed to check in by August 7th, her family grew concerned. Darya's parents contacted Ukrainian officials, who in turn reached out to the authorities in Shanghai. At first, Chinese authorities treated it as a low priority case, but with the mounting diplomatic pressure, a missing person investigation was launched. At first, investigators considered the possibility that Darya had simply left China without informing anyone. That theory, though, quickly collapsed. Immigration records showed she had never departed the country. Police checked hospitals and morgues but did not find her. Investigators then examined Darya's phone records. Unknown to her family, Darya had received a strange phone call that evening on August 5th from an unidentified man. According to her roommate, Alexandra, on the evening of August 5th, Darya abruptly left her apartment after receiving the call. She reported that the caller had asked Darya to meet him at a local hotel. This was the third such odd call she had gotten that week, and each time no one had showed up. Security footage from the Holiday Inn reportedly showed Darya arriving around 3 a.m. She entered the lobby. She waited. 15 minutes passed and no one came. Eventually, she stood up and walked out of the hotel alone. Hotel security later confirmed that the person she had been waiting for never appeared. Friends later told investigators that Darya had very little money left. She was expecting to receive a payment for a recent modeling work within the next few days, but until then, she was nearly broke. According to her friends, she couldn't even afford a taxi back to her apartment. Instead, she began walking. The journey from the Holiday Inn to her apartment would have taken around 2 hours on foot. Shanghai's streets are watched by one of the largest surveillance networks in the world. Cameras overlook bridges, subway stations, shopping centers, hotels, and apartment buildings. Investigators expected that they would simply catch Darya on CCTV and follow her from one camera to the next until they found where she had gone. In fact, she was caught on CCTV cameras near the Oriental Pearl TV tower in Shanghai's Lizuazui district between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. on August 6, 2016. Hey guys, just jumping in to let you guys know that I looked extensively for the actual CCTV footage, but it does not seem that the CCTV footage was actually released to the public. I tried finding it, but I couldn't find. There's only one still image that I was able to find, but I don't know if it's from the same CCTV footage because the image shows Darya in a subway, and according to the details, she was near a river. So just wanted to clarify this. Now back to the video. The footage shows Darya walking along the waterfront promenade known as the Bund, listening to music on her headphones and dancing lightly. At one point, she boarded a small ferry and rode across the Huangpu River, then walked back towards the opposite bank. As she walked, Darya remained in contact with several friends, but what she told them didn't match. One friend recalled that Darya said that she was simply heading home. Another remembered a completely different conversation. According to that account, Darya said she planned to visit a nightclub instead. hoping to distract herself after being stood up at the hotel. It is unclear where she was going. Perhaps she was going back home, or maybe she was going to the club and hoping someone would buy her a drink since she didn't have any money. Those brief chats would become the last known conversations Darya ever had. In the footage, Darya's demeanor was calm and unhurried. However, after she turned a corner in a narrow back street, the cameras lost her. It was only a short gap, a blind spot. Normally, someone walking through that area should have appeared on another camera seconds or minutes later. Darya never did. That empty block had very little surveillance, and no other passerby was seen with her. That tiny stretch of the missing surveillance became the defining detail of the case. One camera captured her approaching, no camera ever captured her leaving. It was as though she had simply vanished between one camera and the next. After reviewing the available evidence, Shanghai police developed their first working theory. Investigators focused on the CCTV footage. In the recordings, Darya could be seen wearing headphones, occasionally dancing and swaying as she walked along the waterfront. Shanghai police believed her behavior appeared unusual, suggested she might have been under the influence of drugs or another intoxicating substance. From there, they proposed a possible explanation. According to the investigators, Darya may have wandered too close to the river, falling into the water accidentally or deliberately jumping. However, her family argued that she was simply enjoying the music. She showed no obvious signs of distress or fear. But according to Darya's family, Shanghai police put the case aside as accidental drowning or suicide. It was only after Darya's father flew to China and formally pressed the matter with support from Ukrainian diplomats that the investigation intensified. Under diplomatic pressure, the police ultimately allowed Darya's father to view the complete surveillance footage. The video clearly showed Darya walking through the street, boarding the ferry, crossing back, and then abruptly disappearing at the blank stretch. Expert analysts brought in by the family agreed Darya looked calm in the footage, raising questions about the suicide theory. Search teams then organized divers to scour the Hongpo River near where she was last seen. Despite an extensive search, no trace of her was ever found. Darya's family argued that if she had drowned, investigators would have likely recovered either her body or some physical evidence. As months passed, Darya's family grew increasingly frustrated with the investigation. Police discouraged him from conducting his own search in Shanghai, saying that it could interfere with their work. He also questioned several aspects of the investigation, believing certain leads had not been pursued as aggressively as they should have been. Those concerns extended to Darya's friends. Several of the young models who lived or knew Darya were interviewed for hours by police. According to later accounts from those friends, investigators repeatedly questioned them about whether Darya had used illegal drugs. Some said they felt pressured to support that theory. One of the most controversial aspects of Darya's disappearance concerns allegation that she occasionally used illegal drugs while living in Shanghai. Several friends reportedly acknowledged that she had experimented with drugs. Private messages later circulated online appeared to show Darya discussing substance use and expressing a desire to stop. There are also videos that have circulated online in which she appears visibly intoxicated while speaking with friends. Some investigators believed those allegations supported the accidental drowning theory. Her family strongly disagreed. They insisted that regardless of any personal struggles she may have had, Darya was making plans for her future, continuing to work, and had no reason to intentionally disappear. To this day, no evidence has surfaced that drugs directly contributed to her disappearance. One of the strangest details emerged months later. According to Darya's sister, someone continued accessing Darya's VKontakte page after she had vanished. VKontakte is the largest social media platform in Russia. It allows users to connect to friends, share media, send messages, and join groups, just like Facebook. Only two people supposedly knew the password to Darya's account, and both denied giving anyone else access. The family asked investigators to trace the login locations, but no public evidence has ever shown whether the police were able to identify who was behind those logins. Frustrated by the lack of progress, her father began investigating the case himself. His attention soon turned to Pavel Dongzashvili, a man Darya had met during previous trips to China and remained in close contact with. Unlike her other friends who willingly spoke with investigators and the family, Pavel reportedly avoided all attempts to contact him. Neighbors and local shopkeepers also told the family that they had often seen Darya with him. Then came another surprise. According to the Ukrainian consulate, Pavel left China for Georgia the day after Darya disappeared, despite having lived and worked in Shanghai for 5 years. Later, Pavel contacted Darya's father with an extraordinary claim. The father alleged that Pavel offered to reveal who was responsible for Darya's disappearance, but only in exchange for money. Pavel reportedly claimed that he had a girlfriend in China and that her brother works as a police officer in Shanghai, and that the kidnapping was organized by him. According to him, the girl took revenge on Darya out of jealousy. But when the family agreed to pay him only if Darya was found, Pavel withdrew the story, calling it a joke. Despite these allegations, Pavel returned to China and was never publicly questioned by police. With no definitive evidence explaining what happened to Darya, several theories have emerged over the years. The first is the accidental drowning that I've already talked about. Another widely discussed theory is abduction. Darya's family believes she was lured into Shanghai's waterfront after the mysterious meeting at the Holiday Inn. Darya had reportedly been invited to meet the same individual on 2 previous occasions, only for the meeting to be cancelled each time at the last minute. Friends have questioned whether those earlier meetings had been genuine or whether someone had been testing her routine and movements around the city. The fact that she disappeared immediately after entering a CCTV blind spot has led some to believe that she may have been forced into a waiting vehicle or persuaded to leave with someone that she trusted. Some have also speculated that Darya could have become a victim of human trafficking. The idea seems plausible to many observers. Darya was young, she was living alone in a foreign country, she worked in an industry that frequently required meeting unfamiliar clients and traveling to new locations. Cases involving trafficking networks exploiting vulnerable women do exist around the world, making the theory difficult to dismiss outright. Then came an alleged sighting. According to one of Darya's acquaintances, she believed she had seen Darya months after her disappearance inside a Shanghai nightclub. She later claimed that the young woman looked disoriented, almost emotionless. When she called out Darya's name, the woman reportedly turned around before 2 unidentified men quickly led her away. If true, it would have been one of the most important developments in the entire investigation. However, no CCTV footage supported the claim. No independent witnesses came forward. Police never confirmed that the woman was actually Darya. Recently, in 2026, court records connected to Jeffrey Epstein became public. Soon after the documents were released, several Ukrainian and Russian media outlets reported that investigators and internet users had noticed a reference to someone using the nickname Bulba. The surname immediately fueled speculation that documents might somehow be connected to Darya's disappearance. The story spread quickly across social media, with some claiming Darya had been recruited into Epstein's trafficking network before vanishing in Shanghai. However, there is currently no credible evidence supporting that possibility. No investigator has publicly suggested such a connection. No official documents link Darya to Epstein, and no witnesses have ever claimed she was involved with his organization. A decade has gone by, and Darya remains missing to this day.